everyone, and welcome to Co's December 2025 Small Business Update. I'm Jeanette Mulvey, the editor-in-chief of Co by U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Today, we're going to cover all the major issues impacting small businesses right now and get you ready for 2026. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Dell, H&R Block, Oracle NetSuite, and Square. Thank you to all of you for your partnership in supporting this series. I'm excited to be joined today by Neil Bradley, Executive Vice President, Chief Policy Officer, and Head of Strategic Advocacy for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Neil, and thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Jeanette. It's great to see you. I cannot believe it's December. Where has the year gone? Oh, my goodness.
But it's been a busy year, and we're going to talk about a lot of the issues that happen right now. So let's start by talking about the economy generally. How are things looking right now? What's looking good to you?
I think in general, the economy's okay. It's not great. It's not phenomenal, but it's not bad either. And so we have a number of tailwinds that are helping the economy. Part of that is the resolution of the tax bill earlier this year and some of the incentives. Part of that's the regulatory relief and a more favorable regulatory environment coming out of Washington. We have some headwinds, particularly in the form of tariffs that are really raising prices for a lot of businesses and families. Workforce, immigration in various sectors and parts of the country are also a headwind today. And so, we look at it and we're growing, let's say at about 2% a year. If we could get rid of some of these headwinds, we could be growing 50% faster. We could be growing at about a 3%. So it's not a recession, but we shouldn't exactly be satisfied with where we are today.
Well, let's talk about a lot of those issues right now. So tariffs are very much still in the news. There's a lot happening there. So could you update us on the tariff situation?
Yeah, so tariffs have been up and down and on and off over the course of this year, both on individual countries and on products. Some of the volatility that we saw earlier this year seems to have settled out, and it's a little bit more predictable about where we are, particularly with some of our largest trading partners, including Europe and China, and of course, our friends in Canada and Mexico. We are at a tariff level that is somewhere between 8 to 10 times higher than where we began the year. We know that a lot of businesses have had to adjust supply chains, try to adjust their inventory levels, try to manage these tariffs. They're now in a process where a lot of the tariff costs are slowly being passed on to consumers. It's one of the things that's kind of lifting inflation. When we think about kind of going ahead, there's a Supreme Court case that was just argued that is challenging the president's authority under what's called IEEPA to do a lot of the tariffs that have been done. Not all of them. Some have been done under different statutory authorities, but roughly half of the dollar value of tariffs that are in place today come from this authority. And we expect that the Supreme Court will give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the legality of these tariffs sometime over the next couple of months.
If the Supreme Court decides that mechanism for imposing tariffs is not constitutional, are there other mechanisms that could be used instead to achieve the same goals?
Yeah, I think there's two things to note. One is largely there are other statutory authorities that the president has that he would be able to replace most of the tariffs, not all of them, and some of the replacements, the tariffs might not quite be as high, or he might have to wait 30 days, or there might be a kind of a process. But in general, he would have the option of replacing most of the tariffs. And Secretary Lutnick said, who's the Commerce Secretary, said this week, in fact, that they were if it were struck down, which he doesn't think it will be, but of course he has to say that if they are struck down, that they would have other authorities. I think the second thing is, well, what happens to all the tariffs that people have already paid? And this is a big question that everyone's kind of trying to read the tea leaves on with the Supreme Court. It's typically, if the government has illegally collected a tax from you, they're required to pay you back. Now, the way the court could do that is they could simply say, well, only the people who've sued are immediately, everyone else are entitled to a refund. Everyone else is going to have to go through a process. We know that some businesses are already filing challenges against the tariffs that they've paid, just in anticipation that they might need to do that. Or it might be the case that the courts and the administration simply say, everyone's entitled to a refund and we're going to process it. We don't really know. And that's going to be one of the key things that we're looking for if the court does say that these tariffs are unconstitutional.
Up until this very moment, anytime I heard about the possibility of a tariff refund, I was making the assumption that that would be for businesses. But can you clarify? Would it be businesses that would be getting a refund, or would it be consumers?
No, it's just the business. So the importer of record who paid the tariff would be the one that's entitled to the refund.
But as of now, there's no mechanism in place for that to happen.
No, that's right. And that's why you've seen a growing number of businesses file litigation, kind of challenging the lawsuits, or challenging the tariffs, excuse me. The other thing that, people can do is there's an administrative process. This is a routine thing. So sometimes the thing that you imported gets classified the wrong way. And you go, hey, wait a minute, I shouldn't have had to pay that high of a tariff. And you file an appeal and you kind of go through that process. It could work that way. Or it could work that the government simply says, we know everyone who paid us these tariffs will organize an orderly refund process. But we won't know really how this is going to work until, at a minimum, we get the court decision. And even then, there may be some unanswered questions we have to work through.
And you think that decision is expected when?
Yeah, I think over the next couple of months. There's some people who are speculating it could happen this month. I'm a little less optimistic that we get a decision this month, but I think certainly January, February at the latest.
So I think this would be a good time to mention to everyone watching that you and I have talked about that when this decision happens, we will stand up one of these small business updates to really cover that decision and what it means for small businesses. So keep your eyes out to our audience. Keep your eyes out for that. Speaking of the audience, Neil, we've done something different with this small business update that we've never done before, which is that when we had people register, they were able to submit questions to us for you. So I'm going to ask you our first audience question. This is from a manufacturer in West New York, New Jersey, and they ask, how will tariffs impact our ability to export, and what legislation is happening that will impact U.S. companies exporting in 2026?
Yeah. So in the past, when the U.S. has increased tariffs on other countries have generally responded by increasing tariffs on U.S. products. And that would directly impact exporters, like the manufacturer who kindly sent us this question. We're not seeing as much of that this year. I think a lot of other countries are realizing that if they impose tariffs, it's just going to hurt their consumers. And so they're not doing that. But I will say that it has caused a lot of people around the world to think about reorienting their own supply chains. And so it may be the case that people find it, depending on the market that they're exporting into or the product and the level of competition, that it might be a little bit harder to access some of those markets than it has been in the past.
Let's talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill, which we've covered in past small business updates, but there's a lot to cover there, and it really directly impacts small businesses in a lot of ways. You talked before about taxes, but can you talk a little bit more about what aspects of that legislation are really small businesses can expect to experience in the coming year?
Yeah, so let's start with we avoided a massive tax increase, right? So the 20% pass-through deduction, which is what most small businesses use to lower their taxes, that was going to expire at the end of this year. That has now been made permanent. We're not worried about this massive tax increase on every small business in America. Two other ways that I think there are real immediate kind of benefits. The first is if you're a small business or any size business, really, that has research and development expenses, you know that for the last couple of years, you actually haven't been able to fully deduct those expenses. You've had to amortize them or write them off over a number of years. You no longer have to do that. So if you spend $100 in R&D, you get to deduct $100 as a business expense. Importantly, if you are a small business, you don't have to wait to reclaim the refund, to claim your refund. This tax relief is now retroactive, and you can go back and claim additional tax benefits for the last couple of years. And so if you've done that already, you know the benefit of that. If you're waiting until you do your 2025 taxes next year, that'll be an important benefit to claim. I think the third element is the ability to expense or fully deduct the cost of new equipment for your business. And so I think a lot of folks know that depending on the equipment that you buy and how the tax code has treated it, if you bought a particular piece of machinery or equipment for your business, in the past, you might have had to deduct that expense over a number of years, which, by the way, means it's more expensive because of the time value of money. What the new law says is that you get to write off 100% of the expense immediately. That makes investing in new equipment, in new vehicles for your business even more attractive. And that's also retroactive to the beginning of this year.
So, speaking of vehicles, I have another audience question, and this is from a small business in Christiansburg, Virginia. And they ask, what are some of the year end benefits of the One Big Beautiful Bill for capital expenses such as vehicles, which you kind of just answered? But then they ask, does it apply to vehicle leases as well?
Yeah, no, not to vehicle leases. So, if you're leasing a vehicle for your business, you'll be able to deduct the cost of your lease as a regular business expense, but you can't write off the 5 years of lease payments in kind of year one. So this is for capital acquisition where you're actually making the investment and acquiring that piece of capital, in this case, a vehicle, in a particular year, and your ability to fully expense that. So the other thing that year-end benefits that I think would be particularly applicable for a lot of people watching today is there are kind of two ways that you can expense a piece of property, meaning write off 100% of the cost. If you're a big business, there's a lot more kind of documentation and things that are required. If you're a smaller business, you can take advantage of what's called Section 179. It's just a simplified process. That Section 179 process used to be capped at something like $1.5 million a year. We've expanded the value of that. And so it'll just be easier come tax time for a lot of small businesses to work with their accountants, and it'll be just less paperwork, which obviously is both a time and a dollar savings.
You just said property, so I just want to clarify. Do you mean anything that you can own, including vehicles and equipment, or do you mean real estate?
Real estate's a little bit different. Not to go into a deep rabbit hole, but there's a particular provision in the bill that's brand new for certain production facilities. Think about like a new manufacturing plant. So if you were a small business and you were, or any business, and you were building a new manufacturing facility, normally you would have to deduct the cost of that facility, meaning the physical plant, the building that you're in, sometimes over the course of like 3 decades or more. You can, for a limited time, deduct 100% of that physical property. But in general, when I say property, what I'm talking about is computers, lathes and machines, printing things, like the things that go into the building that you use to run your businesses, plus the vehicles that you use, the steer loaders, if you're using construction equipment, things like that.
Great. Okay, thank you. So in September, the administration instituted a $100,000 fee for any company wanting to hire a foreign worker using an H-1B visa. I think that's per employee, or maybe it's not. So you can tell me. How is that impacting small businesses, and is there a chance that that fee is going to eventually be rescinded?
Yeah, so the H-1B program's been around for a long time. Each year, about 88,000 people can be sponsored to come into the United States to work for a U.S. business. And they're coming in based on the particular skills that they have to help fill a gap. And so it can be a doctor or a radiologist in a rural hospital. It can be a computer programmer at your business. It can be a welder or an architect in your business. There's no particular categories. It also applies that if you were a foreign student here, sometimes you can stay here. You've gotten your education, you can stay and work for a U.S. business. A lot of people, particularly here in Washington, think of this as a program for big businesses. It's true that there are big businesses that use it, but the government's own data, about 3/4 of the users of the program are actually defined as small businesses. And there are about 14,000 businesses that had one H-1B employee last year. And so those also tend to be generally small businesses. If the $100,000 fee would remain in place, obviously that's really cost prohibitive, especially for small businesses. The U.S. Chamber sued over this. We don't believe that the authority exists to impose this fee. We think it would be particularly harmful for all those small businesses who can't afford it and wouldn't be able to access the talent that they need. That's going to be heard by the court a little later this year, and we'll see what the court has to say. But the best chance for it not to go into effect next year is if the courts agree with us at the U.S. Chamber that this just isn't legal.
Is it $100,000 per visa holder,
Per
or is
visa.
it per company? Okay,
Per visa. Yeah. So
great.
if you have 5 H-1B visa folks that you want to bring in, that's $500,000.
And is that one time or is that per year?
So it would be when that person comes in. If you're bringing in another 2 people the next year, then that's another 200,000.
Got it. Okay. So, audience question, this is from a New York City consulting business. So, they're asking if they have an employee who's working for them now and that employee's legal authority to work is revoked, would the employer be penalized? And I guess my additional question would be, how would the employer even know?
Yeah. Yeah. So right now, obviously, if you're a U.S. citizen, your employer knows you're a U.S. citizen. That's fine. If you're not a U.S. citizen, certain documentation is provided to the employer that says, yes, this person is legally authorized to work in the United States. The document that the employer sees generally has the date that legal work authorization expires. It might be a year from now, it might be 3, it might be 5 or 6 years from now. All you know is that they have a legal authority to work granted by the government and the date in which that legal authority is scheduled to expire. The administration's been making a number of changes, working to make a number of changes to end some of those work authorizations before the date that is listed on people's kind of work cards. This creates the problem that you just described, which is the document that you have as the employer says that they can work until, March 2027. If all of a sudden that gets rescinded in January of 2026, how are you supposed to know? This is something that we've asked the administration to provide guidance on. Technically, once an individual's work authorization has expired, even if it's before the date, it is illegal for you to employ them. It's inappropriate for you to employ them. But there's really no way that you would probably know that. And so we're working to get clarification out of the administration and to make clear that employers aren't going to be penalized for following the law as it's traditionally been understood.
Thank you. Shifting gears, You and I have talked many times about the hiring challenges faced by all businesses and small businesses in particular. Um, and the chamber is doing something very interesting that's really different than anything I've heard of before, which is that we've partnered with the College Board, the organization that everyone knows, to create something called it's an AP class called AP Business and Personal Finance. And these are classes, AP classes that can be taken in high school by students. And the idea is that this can help prepare students for entering business, whether it's to start their own businesses or to work for businesses. So, can you tell us a little bit about this program and how it's preparing people to enter the workforce?
Yeah. I bet a lot of people joining us today have heard of, AP classes. And so these are classes that kids take in high school. And if you score high enough on the exam, most colleges will give you credit for those courses. In that way, AP Business and Personal Finance works like AP English or AP Calculus or AP Chemistry. But we should remember that there's a third of high school graduates who aren't going on to college. They tend to go straight into the workforce. And our own survey data, and I bet many people's real life experience, is that the vast majority of those individuals really aren't prepared with skills to enter the workforce. Our survey data says 84% of them aren't prepared to enter the workforce. So the neat thing about this class is that it's designed to teach you basic principles about business, marketing, profit and loss, how businesses operate, how they price, the things that you kind of learn traditionally when you get your first job. You can learn these things in high school. And that if you take the class and you're not going on to college, it becomes a credential that employers could recognize. So, imagine you're a retail store and you're hiring folks right out of high school or without a college degree to work, that this program would have been their entry point into understanding how businesses like yours operate and will make them a better employee. In addition to the fact that they've learned something about personal finance, it's a lot easier. We hear from employers all the time that they have a good employee, but they don't understand how to manage their money. And that creates real tensions for the employee. It makes them distracted in their work. It causes lots of concern. Kids learning a little bit about personal finance, what credit means, what debt means, understanding the implications of it, we think will help them succeed in life, but also make them better employees.
It's so interesting. It's really, thank you for explaining that. Let's talk about AI. We've talked a lot about how AI can help small businesses. And in fact, with what we were just talking about, which is where there's a hiring gap or a skills gap, companies are using AI to do more rote tasks so they can use their human employees to do the more complex and creative things. So let's just talk a little bit about, first of all, are you seeing anything really interesting that small businesses are doing with AI?
Well, I actually think small businesses are doing the most interesting stuff that I'm seeing with AI. And so our survey data shows 58% of small businesses are already using generative AI. And, they're doing things like the restaurant that wants to reduce food waste and is using AI to both optimize their menu and optimize their food orders, which reduces waste, which of course improves margins. And by the way, now that they've come up with a new menu that maybe is seasonally adjusted, for example, they're not having to contract out to create that new menu. AI is designing it for them. And so the level of kind of sophistication and advancement that's going on at the small business level is really incredible and really remarkable.
So, with AI come some questions about the regulatory atmosphere around AI, which is still kind of evolving. We have an audience question on that topic. This is from a marketing firm in Sandy Spring, Georgia. And they say, will the government require AI generated content to be identified as such in the marketplace?
The short answer is we don't know yet. And so various states are considering proposals, and sometimes they're requiring that AI generated content, say, for example, in TV commercials, be labeled or in political ads be labeled, but not in other commercial things. Other states are wanting labels on everything. And so it really varies from state to state, actually, which is one of our big concerns at the U.S. Chamber, because imagine you happen to be a small business using AI to generate marketing material, and you happen to be located next to a state border. And so some of your customers are in the state that you're in, some of them drive across the state line every day. All of a sudden, you could be required to follow two very different sets of rules for your customers based on the things that you're generating for them to see. So it's an area of deep concern for us because we very much believe you need a national set of rules that you can be comfortable following and knowing that you're not tripping up, like the example that I just gave.
Before we move on from AI, this is my chance to plug something that I've been working on, which is that the U.S. Chamber and the U.S. Chamber Foundation are partnering to launch an AI training program specifically for small businesses. So there will be a virtual component where you can do this online, and there will be in-person trainings. But on the Watch Live page that everyone's watching right now, you can sign up to be alerted when our virtual training opens, and we're really excited to offer that. We think it's going to be very unique, especially because it's customized for small businesses. Neil, I have a couple more general audience Q&As for you. This one is from a brewing company in Hawaii. And they say insurance premiums for necessary coverage like general liability increased dramatically for them in 2025. Do you foresee continued increases? And are there any initiatives that could possibly keep this in check?
Yeah, insurance costs are a real concern, particularly in a lot of places around the country. And I think it's important to understand kind of what's driving those insurance increased costs. On one hand, as the cost of everything gets more expensive, your cost of replacing things therefore gets more expensive, and your insurance rates go up. And so imagine you got insurance on your home or on your business against weather damage. Well, if your house, your business is wood and asphalt shingles and those type of things. Those are things that we're now tariffing. And when you tariff them, that means it costs more to build back your business or your home when it's been damaged in a weather incident. Insurance companies are having to raise insurance rates to offset that. That's particularly what's going on in a lot of auto insurance rates right now. So parts to fix your car after an accident are being tariffed at 25%. That means that the insurance companies who are paying the cost for that part have to raise your rates in order to pay for those tariffs. The second thing that's going on, and this does tend to vary state to state, is there is a lot of litigation around accidents, slip and falls at a place of business, an auto accident, a truck driving accident. And we've seen a real rise in a lot of states of what are, $1 million, $10 million, $100 million verdicts where trial lawyers are suing. They're garnering these huge kind of verdict and paydays. Insurance companies are the ones who pay that. And of course, for them to be able to pay that, they have to recoup that in premiums that they charge to kind of all ratepayers. And so take a state like Florida, who recently reformed their tort reform or legal liability laws. They're actually seeing insurance rates begin to moderate. They're actually seeing more insurance providers come back into the states because they're not worried about being bankrupted by, a $500 million verdict and their ability to pass it along. So there is hope. There are things that we can do. We can do something about the tariffs. We can do something about the legal system. But if we don't do anything about those things, I very much worry that rates are going to keep going up.
All right, Neil, we have one more audience question before we go. And this one is from a construction firm in Clackamas, Oregon. They say compliance is a big concern for us. We spend an inordinate amount of time filling forms for both state and federal agencies. Any relief coming?
Yes, this is some good news. And so I can't speak to all the states, and so I won't opine on what's happening at the state level. But at the federal level, we've seen a real push to reduce the regulatory paperwork burden, particularly on small businesses. And so let me just give you one example. Earlier this year, the Trump administration reversed a program that had gone into effect a couple of years ago that was requiring every business in America, every small business in America that isn't kind of publicly traded, to report your so-called beneficial ownership. So these were papers that you were going to have to file with the federal government, along with copies of your driver's license and all this other stuff, just to tell the federal government who owned the business and if anyone else had a stake in your business. There wasn't a lot of benefit to this, but there was a lot of paperwork and compliance. And by the way, if you didn't do it, you could be fined and you actually could go to jail. That's been stripped away. That's no longer a requirement. Folks won't have to do that. We've had other examples of tax filing issues that required a lot of paperwork that are being simplified at the federal level. So I want to flag for our audience, folks, if you see a particular paperwork regulatory burden that's impacting your business, send us a note, send us a message. I think we have an open door, particularly with this administration, to try to roll back some of those regulatory requirements and give a little relief to small businesses.
Thank you, Neil. I'm just going to ask you a question we didn't script, which is, are you frequenting any small businesses near you lately that you think are doing a great job?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. Our favorite restaurants in our neighborhood are all small businesses. But my son is into snow skiing, and I don't know a lot about snow skiing. And there was a local small business who sells skis, and they had this wonderful gentleman who, like, and told us everything we needed to know. And so right after Thanksgiving, we're in this store, and I feel good about my son getting out on the slopes this winter because he's got really good equipment because of a small business and a guy who worked there who just took the time to help my wife and I and our son. And so I feel like that's happening to us all the time, and I'm so grateful for businesses like that who have really caring employees who want to help dads like me who don't know a whole lot about things like skiing.
Yeah, and that's where small businesses can really differentiate themselves is with that time and expertise. So, thank you so much, Neil. That's all we have time for today. We really appreciate you coming and talking to us.
Thanks, Jeanette. Great to see you.
You too. Thank you. Thanks to our audience at home for watching. If you'd like to watch this event again or share it on your socials, we'll be sending you an email with this recording. And we'll also be sending you all the information you need to take advantage of the resources that we talked about today. So thank you, everyone, for watching, and we will be back in January. Take care, everyone.